We are back. Another week of the On Blast podcast, NFL Picks Edition, and it is week 10. What? Does that even make sense? Week 10 in the NFL season. My name is Sheldon Alexander. I'm joined, as always, by my dude, score betting writer, Mr. Matt Russell. How you doing, my dude? Week 10.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're into week 10 because week 9 stunk. I really could have done without week 9 as a general principle. Honestly, it wasn't even that bad. I think I finished around 500 from a record standpoint. It was 6-6-1, but like every bet that I felt really good about lost. And it's like crisis of confidence, and you kind of forget about the ones that you win. You know, at 2 and 3 in our underdog bets that we make, you know, that are part of the round robin underdog moneyline parlay. Those spread bets went 2 and 3. Of course, the parlay did not win, so you end up sort of 2 and 4 from a record standpoint there. 1-1-1 on my 3 best against the spread bets that aren't included in all of that. So yeah, just kind of kicking money around, dropping a little bit here and there, but looking for a bounce back week is a lot of the times. You know, the teams on the field are looking for a bounce back week, and now the teams off the field are looking for a bounce back week, and we'll get it.
That's what we do. That's what we do here. Now, a reminder to follow Matt on Twitter at MRussAuthentic and everything he does at The Score as well. And huge shouts to the people that are following us here on this podcast, On Blast Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. You mentioned the need for a bounce back week, and I'm right there with you, my dude. Last week I went 5-6-2, bringing the season total to 78-52-6. Talk about it all the time, right? You build up all the currency for when weeks like that happen. Hey, keep the train moving. And we're 10 weeks in. I keep saying off to a good start, but at 10 weeks, it's like, okay. But I'm going to be honest with you. Going through the lines this week, there's so many different things that I'm reminding myself about in terms of, okay, this team coming off a bye week, how that plays into certain things, and also getting back into like laying points. I feel like what happens is start of the season, taking the points a lot, taking the underdogs a lot. And then at a certain point in the middle of the season, I get messed up because I remember, you know what? There's certain spots where it's okay to lay the points. It's a difficult dance. Yeah. But that's what we do here in the NFL. And we start with a very weird game on Thursday Night Football. I mean, hey, aren't they always weird? But we got the Falcons as 3-point favorites against the Panthers. This is a game as a reason why I hate Thursday Night Football and betting on Thursday Night Football. 2 bad teams that I have no idea how they're going to react on a short week on a Thursday night. Literally anything's possible. You could tell me any outcome of this game and I'd be like, okay, cool. Yeah. Add in the fact these 2 teams played a wild game 2 weeks ago, which the Falcons should have covered the 4.5 points. But of course, they're the Falcons, so they blew it late. And by blew it, I mean they don't cover for us because they did win in OT. But here we are, 3-point favorites. I just can't. I have no faith in the Panthers anymore. And plus, once you're bringing back Baker Mayfield to try to save the day and like possibility of Baker Mayfield music, I'm not about that life. Give me the Atlanta Falcons. I don't like laying 3 points on the road with the Atlanta Falcons. But as mentioned, Baker Mayfield's involved. I'm not about that life. What say you, my friend?
Is Baker Mayfield involved?
He might be involved. I'm saying the fact that they're turning to him last week when things were grim means that it's at least back on the table, which I thought I would never see Baker Mayfield.
That's right.
Right? I thought we were done with that.
They haven't hit play necessarily on the Baker Mayfield music, but it's certainly like the disc is in slot 2 of their 5-disc changer, because the Panthers don't have anything digital going in their whole music operation, right? They're still working off of like somebody's trunk, and having a 5-disc CD changer, for those of you old enough to sort of remember that. It's funny that your lead in there is interesting, especially going into the Falcons as the pick, because I felt like the Falcons weren't deserved of that cover, outside of the fact that yes, they had a 6-point lead when PJ Walker threw the ball like 70 yards in the air, because because just the way that the entire game played out, right? Like Carolina looked like the better team, and there was obviously a sort of a dropped. It's funny, nobody remembers DJ Moore dropping a 4th down pass before that catch, right? Like that was a totally redeem yourself type moment, because if he catches the fourth down pass that hits him in the chest, then we never have all of this, absolute chaos that happened after that. Which, of course, if that game, sort of transported itself and happened on Thursday night, like we've talked about before, we'd be talking about that insane game for like the rest of our lives. Remember that Thursday night game where DJ Moore caught the 60 whatever yard pass? And it's like, it's just kind of this anecdote instead of this thing that we all lived through. So all that is to say, back to that game, is Atlanta was a 4-point, closed a 4-point home favorite in that game. And now they're a 3-point road favorite. And so I'm not really entirely sure what happened here, where all that happened was 1 point move from an entire location move. Now, I'm not saying like Atlanta has some great home field advantage, maybe 2 points at best, probably closer to the sort of average 1.5 that bookmakers are sort of giving them at this point. And you can easily tell me that Carolina doesn't have anything of a home field half point or a point, but like that's still getting us to like 2. So the fact that we're down to we're only at 3 here, like I kind of feel like this should be like, I shouldn't say I kind of think, I am quite certain that this should be lower than 3. Like, why, to me, going back to that game, it kind of felt like Atlanta should be 2.5 at home and Carolina should be 2.5. Like it should be kind of treated like that, obviously 2.5. We're kind of getting into negligible territory there, but the key number of 3 being the key in all of this. And so what's changed since then? That was 2 weeks ago in a game that, as mentioned, hotly contested, could have gone either way, all that sort of thing. Well, Carolina got absolutely blown out by Cincinnati last week.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds pretty familiar to me, man, because the Falcons did the exact same thing, or had the exact same thing done to them, the week before playing Carolina, right? And that's why we saw that line go from 5.5 down to 4, because it was like, oh man, like Atlanta's terrible. They got blown out by Cincinnati. It's like we're having a deja vu moment here with now the Panthers sort of taking that role. And so like it sucks to say, but like the value's all on the Panthers at +3, right? Like these last 2 games that they have played, like obviously have been road games, the one in Atlanta and then Cincinnati. So they return home. The last time they were at home, they beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And listen, we will have a conversation about how good the Buccaneers may or may not be. I think literally in the very next game. But like fundamentally here, like PJ Walker had a terrible game. The coach mentioned it. Guys have bad games. He's like, if we were just benching everybody who had a bad game, then like nobody would ever play in this league. And like, that's a fair call. And like Atlanta still has the same issues from, defensive secondary, et cetera, et cetera. That might work out nicely for them because apparently it's going to be quite rainy and windy in Carolina. And you get that sort of like southern stormy type of a night. That obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but that feels like it's going to help Atlanta because of their ground game. But honestly, if you were even less concerned about Marcus Mariota throwing the ball down the field, then your defensive support should be augmented there for the Panthers, right? Whereas, like, who knows what PJ Walker might do, or Baker Mayfield, or Sam Darnold, or whoever might actually participate in this game. So, I just think there's a ton of, absolute chaos, like the first game, potential in this game, turnovers, right? Fumbles, all of that kind of just ugly stuff where we're sitting back and going like, man, yet another ugly Thursday night game. But like, to me, that breeds sort of, uncertainty. And if we can get 3 points here with the Panthers, like, I think we just have to take them, right? I'm not like tripping over myself to do it, but like, it also brings in, what version of the Panthers are we going to get? Are we going to get the version that should have, I know, in my opinion, and listen, field goal kick in overtime away from doing it, should have won that game against Atlanta? Or, is it the version of the team that beat the Buccaneers? Right? Like that version does exist, right? Whereas the Falcons are just kind of like, we're just going to run the football a lot. We're going to hope you don't burn us deep on passes. If you do, we'll sort of tip our cap, but like, we don't really have a plan B. Whereas Carolina is like, they might not have a plan A, but at least like whatever sort of battleship type football they're playing, right? Where they're just kind of guessing stuff along the way. Like sometimes that works out. And so I think there's actually a little bit of value on the money line here too, at +130 on the money line, right? And if I think this game from a market standpoint, point spreads leading up to this game, like this should be about like Atlanta -0.5, right? And so, like, if I think that's the case, or the market thinks that that's the case, and we're just going to over adjust because of honestly one really bad half where it got snowballed like crazy against Cincinnati, like, yeah, give me the Panthers here. And if, my cat popping up here on the screen for those who are watching is an indicator that we're on the Cats, I don't know what else is.
Hey, I think the Cats, and a very nice reason for anyone watching this to just hit us with the like button right there. Who doesn't like cats?
That's right.
Who doesn't like cats? That's what I say. But yeah, tough game there for sure. I have no idea which way that is going to lean. I'm just terrified of rolling with the Panthers and then watching the game and being like, oh, what did I just do? Which could very easily happen with the Falcons as well, which is further to my point.
Yeah.
Let's keep things moving though, because you mentioned there is another game going on in which it involves a team that we were just talking about, which is the Buccaneers. They are playing in Germany, and in Germany, it will be Bucs getting 3 points, laying 3 points.
Yeah.
Pardon me. The Bucs -3 against the Seahawks. This is a very weird line to me, and I understand neutral site, so got to take that into account. But I'm still confused because I just watched the Bucs offense look horrible for an entire game until the very last drive, in which Tom Brady went Tom Brady or the Rams went Rams, as we've seen them this year, and just like the only things you can't give up is exactly what they allowed Brady to do.
Right.
And I know there's a bunch of defenses lined up throughout history that could say the same thing, but that was just a horrible performance by the Rams. We'll get to them later.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of this game, though, I think I'm rolling with Geno. We talked about this last week, and it's until Geno and the Seahawks let me down. It's going to happen at some point. And we're talking about spots, and you almost had me last week. Like I admitted, I admitted that I was foolishly taking Geno because I could see the spot last week in which, it would make sense for them to lose that game. Like that's a tough game. Yeah. And they came out and played really well. In Germany now, this is like Geno's going to show me something here. If him and the Seahawks are able to pull this one out, give me the points. I'll take the 3 points with the Seahawks on this one. Very interested to hear what you're thinking here, because I know the Bucs are a hot topic right now.
Yeah, this one was really weird. So let's back it up to last week's show where, and this is, hand up my mistake, because we talked about how like, oh man, what if the Seahawks lose this game to the Cardinals again, which they were underdogs to win it, and what if the Buccaneers actually have a pretty good offensive showing? And listen, they should have won. They could have won that game easily, right? It's just only because their offense is just so incredibly stagnant and uncreative that it took them that long. And obviously they got helped out by the Rams along the way. But if that had sort of happened the way we wanted to, like we thought there might be like a ton of value on the Seahawks. Now I had forgotten, I was looking just based on the schedule. I'd forgotten the game was in Germany. So I forgot it was a neutral site, because I think I referenced like, the idea that the spread might be like 7.5.
Oh, yes.
Points,
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And then I'm like, later on, I was like, oh, wait, that game's in Germany. Okay. So obviously like take, kind of 2 points off from the Buccaneers side of things. And then now you'd have 6 points, right? That's kind of the point here, is that like from a market standpoint, even with adjustments up for Seattle, down to Tampa Bay, like the line based on, again, all the point spreads up leading up to this probably should be something like Buccaneers -4.5. And what happened was this line opened, and I think it opened around 3, but certainly like 2s and 2.5s were widely available. And like people were gobbling up the +2, plus, 1.5. Like it was already all the way down to 1 for the Bucs.
Yeah.
And it just sort of sent like, it was one of those things that was sort of like paralyzing in like how confusing it was. And like, is Tom Brady out? Like, did somebody am I missing something? I just watched the game because obviously it was a 4:00 start, and the openers had come out like an hour after that game had ended. I was like, how do we, did somebody run on the field and like shiv Tom Brady? Like that, I feel like that would be a bigger, piece of news. And so, you're sitting there going like Tampa -1. And honestly, I didn't even really want to bet Tampa. Right. I was hoping, because our mindset was, well, man, like, what if we can get, I said 8, obviously that sort of meant 6 on a neutral. Like, oh man, if we get 6 with like Seattle, that would be great. But of course they go and they win outright against Arizona. So you go, okay, well, that dream is dead. Like at least we might get 4, something along those lines. And then you look and it's Tampa -1. You're like, what am I supposed to do? Like I'm supposed to bet Tampa Bay at -1. right? Like that's, kind of obvious, except for I just watched 60 minutes of Tampa Bay being just incredibly painful to watch. And of course, like Geno and Seattle and all that sort of excitement. But I also watched 60 minutes of the Arizona Cardinals play, lifeless, confused, like just absolutely irresponsible football where Kyler Murray's just carrying the ball like a jackass down the field, right? Like, feel free to tuck it in, man. Like, how long have you been playing football? Like, you're not playing center field for the Oakland Athletics minor league team here.
Although he might be soon.
He might be soon. No, he'll just be playing Call of Duty on his on a giant bed full of cash. But like this team is so poorly coached and just so ridiculous in everything that they do. Like Robbie Anderson, like just the fact, like, of course they traded for Robbie Anderson because that fits in nicely. A guy who has no concept of how to play football, how to play as a teammate, and just runs fast down the field and is supposed to scare defenses. Like, ooh, no, not Robbie Anderson. Like, of course the Cardinals would make that addition, right? Like, of course they would trade for Hollywood Brown, who, by the way, who was having a nice season this year. But if you watch him play for the Baltimore Ravens, you're like, yes, the guy who drops a lot of passes and kind of screws a lot of stuff up despite having a ton of talent. Like, that's this whole team. That's Cliff Kingsbury's entire persona and existence. So I realize I'm kind of gotten off the rails here with regards to the Cardinals, but
and we'll get back to them later too.
Like the Seahawks, throwing a pick six and all of this stuff, they're just better coached and they're just a lot more solid. Whereas Tampa Bay, for all of the painful sort of visuals in watching them play, it's at least Tom Brady's not throwing interceptions, right? He's not getting confused. It's he's throwing the ball. These guys are dropping the passes. They are getting called for holding penalties. It's kind of everything around him, right? But we're always going to blame the quarterback. We're going to blame the 45-year-old guy. And we're going to be oh man, Tom Brady's lost. It's he's got one interception all year, right? And it's yeah, he's throwing balls away so that it's not getting, but it doesn't feel like it's that far away, except for the fact that the coaching is so incredibly bad, right? For Tampa Bay, where you're just this guy's he's not even aware, the ball, I don't know how closely you watch this game, but a punt lands at the inch yard line and they call it a touchback and he doesn't bother to challenge it. And it's is Bowles even awake here? Just at least try to participate in the game here, man. And Leftwich's play calling's atrocious and all of that sort of thing. And so the reality is, all of this is to say, there's just kind of nothing left in this game because the value play was Tampa -1, -1.5 when that number existed. The hope was to get Seattle at over a field goal. God, would have been nice to get 6, but that way, that was a dream that apparently was just never going to happen. And so now it's just sitting at this flat number of 3, where the game's probably going to land on 3, like it did last week for Tampa Bay against the Rams. You're right. Or, if you're insinuating that the Seahawks sort of dream here season is not going to come to an end, but certainly going to get a hiccup with a tricky spot. Yeah, I believe all of that stuff. So it's Tampa Bay or nothing for me, but it has to be less than a field goal because at 3, it's just, I can't ask this team to win by more than a field goal, which is such a wild and crazy thing to say about a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that has Tom Brady on it.
Yeah, it's not where we
Yeah,
it's not where we thought we'd be with the Tom Brady team. And to be honest, as we switch gears to our next game, it's not where we thought we'd be with an Aaron Rodgers QB team as well. So we move on to the Cowboys, who are 5-point favorites in Green Bay. The Packers, if they're not done, they're on the road to being done, right? That was a cooked performance against the Detroit Lions last week. Just not looking good at all. I feel like there are a lot of teams, as I mentioned earlier, coming off buys, and I'm talking myself into being comfortable in laying points with these teams coming off buys. I don't like this at all. I don't really like taking the Cowboys in this spot, but I feel like I should be getting a really good version of the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't know if a really good version of the Packers exists.
I think both of those statements are fair. There is no planet in which the Cowboys should be 5-point favorites in Lambeau. It just is not, right? Of course we can downgrade the Packers. The problem is with downgrading the Packers after that game is it was unlike the Brady Buccaneers game that we just talked about. It was all Aaron Rodgers' fault, last week, by and large, right? I mean, yeah, there's a couple of fumbles and like things got a little hairy or whatever, but it was a series of bad, ill-advised, throws, an absurd play call to your boy David Bakhtiari, who like apparently is playing just long enough to try to catch touchdowns. Like, what on earth is that?
Yeah.
But the point is like, okay, if you're just going to rely on Aaron Rodgers playing bad, like that's not why the Packers should get this downgrade that they're getting, and they're getting just an absolute absurdly low downgrade, right? And so like market wise, again, think about it this way, right? Last week they closed 4-point road favorites. You and I thought that was way too high. We were on the Lions, all of that good stuff. But like it still suggested that the Packers were, sort of a better than average team, right? Kind of standard is if you're on the road and you're a favorite, like you're kind of better than average unless the team that you're playing is like just atrocious. And now we're going, we're flipping it home field. Like, how high are you rating the Cowboys? What have the Cowboys done to like get some massive rating? Like, I think we have a pretty solid idea of where the Cowboys should be rated, right? That playoff sort of standard, maybe give them an extra couple of rating points into the low 60s because they, have had their bye week, I guess, they're as healthy, I suppose, as they're going to be all season. And obviously Rashawn Gary going out for the Packers is not ideal, but like we're now talking about the Packers as if they are like slightly better than the Houston Texans with this number.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like slightly maybe is a stretch, but we're now talking about the Packers like they're the Bears, like they are, pick your, kind of crappy team here, right? Like Panthers, Jaguars. Honestly, we're treating the Packers like they're the Lions. Yeah. And it's like, well, because the Lions beat them last week. And I'm like, if it was that easy, right? Like we'd all be rich. And honestly, maybe it is that easy. And maybe the Cowboys win this game by a touchdown. But like, no, like this number can't be this number. The result can be the result, right? The Cowboys can win by a touchdown. They could win by 3 touchdowns. Who knows? But like, as far as win probabilities and where we shift the line to create sort of a 50-50 win probability type thing, we're at least 2 points too high on this line, right? Like giving up the key number of 3 in this game is kind of crazy. And you're giving us 4. You and I talked last week about like the idea of, games flipping from 3 and 4 when one team takes a field goal lead relatively early, or even in the second half. Doesn't really matter. Well, like you're going to give us all of that. And like, maybe we're even going to go to 6 here. Like, I don't even know where this is headed to.
Yeah.
Because, like, it doesn't seem like people are against betting on the Cowboys at this number that's already mega inflated. And, like, that's the whole point of a market is, like, if you're going to mega inflate something here, then, like, we have to bet the other way. And so, like, listen, if you don't want to bet the game, you don't have to bet the game. But, like, this has to be Packers or nothing here. Unless, like, okay, fine. If you just want to tell me to my face right now that Aaron Rodgers, somewhat healthy, is just quarterbacking a team that is in the low to mid 30s out of 100 in like a rating, all right, let's go for it, right? Like that's what you're putting your money on, right? So you have to reframe it. Like, are you putting your money on the fact that the Packers are that, with the capitalization on all 4 letters of that bad? Then okay, fine, go for it. But like, it wasn't really that bad last week. He was that bad last week.
I got you. Picking up what you're putting down, my dude. And there's a lot of questions surrounding quarterbacks across the league, including our next game here, which is the Vikings at the Bills. Vikings are heading into Buffalo, and this has been a weird looking line as the Bills are favored by 4. And that has a lot to do with your man's Josh Allen. Last thing I read before we started this pod was from Adam Schefter, who said Bills head coach Sean McDermott called Josh Allen day to day and said they will see if he's able to play on Sunday versus the Vikings due to his UCL injury. Now, for me, I look at this as you've taught me a lot over the last few years, and this line is definitely a Josh Allen not playing line. And the way that I look at this, to me, I'm simplifying this. He's either out and we're getting Case Keenum, or we're getting an injured Josh Allen, which I just saw against the Jets and did not look good. Either way, I understand. If we're thinking that he's not going to play, then, like for sure, take the points because it's just going to keep going the other way. I'm on Minnesota +4 in this game, but I'd like to hear from you, my friend.
Yeah. So, okay. first and foremost, if Josh Allen plays and he's healthy, let's play a little guess the lines here. Like, what would you make? Again, this is pretend that last week never happened.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make this line?
Josh Allen healthy, it's going to be right around a touchdown. You could talk me into like 6.5, 7, somewhere around there.
Yeah, the actual answer is 9.5.
Woo!
And so I say that to sort of tell, to sort of illuminate like how far we've come from what the line was kind of supposed to be. Now, you might have knocked down the Bills a little bit because we've obviously talked at length about how insane the Bills' rating has been up until this point. If they had just lost kind of regularly to the Jets without an injury, you could tell me, okay, like we obviously came way too far when it came to the Bills rating, and we have to knock them down from that like mid 80s to like 80. Still the best team in the league, still really, really good, all of that sort of thing, right? And then at that point, we could be like, okay, well, now the line is 7.5, right? Closer to kind of where, you just sort of referenced. Mm-hmm. But we went through 7 early on the week. Then we kind of malingered around 6 for a little while, right? And then the like official diagnosis of sort of maybe came out today, and it's like, okay, now it goes down to 4. And so the answer is, or the question is, how much further does it go? Right? Like, this is probably the ceiling, unless I guess Josh Allen plays, at which point, like, now you're looking at something closer to 6, 6.5, 7 with an injured Josh Allen. But how far does, what does this mean? Like, and again, we're kind of guessing here, but totally. Like, who are the Bills if Case Keenum is the quarterback? Right?
Great question.
Like, what team are they? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give you some teams, and we're going to play a little game called Better or Worse, right? So better or worse. Chiefs.
Worse.
Easy, right? Eagles.
Worse.
49ers.
I hate Jimmy Garoppolo. I might almost take Case Keenum over Jimmy Garoppolo.
But as a team,
I'm going to say worse.
Yeah. So like, think of it this way, right? Neutral field. If the Bills played the 49ers, right? The 49ers are going to be the favorite. Ravens, better or worse?
Worse.
Cowboys, better or worse?
I'm saying worse. Yeah.
So now we're getting into a zone where, what team's up next on that list of like the power ratings? The Minnesota Vikings, right? Exactly. So Minnesota Vikings, better or worse? Mm-hmm. Are the Bills better or worse than the Minnesota Vikings with Case Keenum? And so like the answer is obviously, I don't know. But if it's kind of like, if the question is, if you don't know, you kind of have to default to like, I don't know, probably the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're about the same.
Does Kirk Cousins have his chains on or no?
He does. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Who knows, right? The point is like if we've kind of mowed down like 7, 8 teams just on that list before we even got weird with like Packers and Buccaneers and all these sort of like brand, based teams. Like we're now down to sort of the reverse brand team of the Vikings, right? And all we ever asked from the Vikings last year, right, is like, hey guys, could you stop giving away games? Could you stop losing close games? And so they fire the coach, they hire a new coach, and like in theory, all we should be asking for then is, could you just win close games?
Yeah.
Right. But somewhere we all kind of got into like, oh, the Vikings need to be blowing teams out. Right? They need to be covering road spreads of over a field goal. They need to be covering home spreads of over a touchdown. When all we ever asked as a society last year of the Vikings was just don't lose these games that are inherently winnable.
Yeah.
And they've accomplished that.
It's true.
And they're sitting here, 6, 7, and 1, whatever they are, right? Like 1 loss on the year. It's like, yeah, because you know what they did? They tightened things up to the point where they don't lose the games that they would have lost last year, right? Like I forget what their record was. It was like 7 and 10 or something like that. It's like, just flip 3 or 4 of these coin flippy type games. And like, yeah, they did it. So like, can we get off the Vikings back a little bit for winning close games? Because like, yeah, they're not amazing. Nobody ever said they were going to be amazing. Listen, there's a lot of teams in this sort of like, as I kind of call it, the high 50s here, these like playoff bound, but not necessarily Super Bowl type teams that would absolutely kill to have the consistency of just hanging around in these games, finding ways to win, and not giving the game away that they did last week.
Yeah. No.
So, we have to at least give them some credit here. And that's why I sort of say, like, maybe the Bills under Case Keenum and obviously with a couple other injury issues, maybe they are kind of the Minnesota Vikings, right? Right down to the fact that they have Case Keenum throwing the ball to Stephon Diggs, which used to be the Minnesota Vikings at one point. And so all of that is to say, if they're about equal, then all you have on this point spread really is the home field advantage for the Bills.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you that's not 4 points, right? It's 2.5 at kind of the maximum, right? This isn't 1987 where you give 3 points for the home field, right? If you hear anybody say that in 2022, you know they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, right? Sportsbooks give 1.5 to 2 sort of at most, right? If this game starts snowing or something gets a little crazy and like for some reason we like the Bills, but I don't even know why you would like the Bills necessarily more just because it got snowy or something like that. Not that that's necessarily going to happen in the second Sunday in November, but like the point is like if he gets announced as out, like this could go through 3, you know? Yeah. But by the way, if it does go through 3 and now we're down to -2, -2.5, we still have obviously uncertainty about the Bills. Maybe they are still pretty good, and maybe they are just better than the Vikings with Case Keenum because he's a professional. He's been around for a really long time. So at, sort of under a field goal, you sort of have to play at the other. These prices, we had a +190 money line available earlier on Wednesday where we got the round robin money line parlay out on the streets as fast as we could so that people could grab that. And now even still, +170, +160, all of that is value-based, right? Yeah. +4 is value-based. But so would be if it gets announced that he comes out and this game gets under a field goal, closer to pick 'em, with still a pretty good Bills team. You know what I mean? So like there's a lot happening here. It's not like +4 is like some incredibly great deal. +7.5 was an incredibly great deal. Right. And so if you sort of saw the injury, report and grab that +7.5 going like, well, there's no way this sounds good. By the way, this is an NFC, game here. This is one of the least important games of the season for the Bills. So like, why on earth would they play him? Right. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the logic that's taking over here, why this number is coming down as far as it has. And I think once you get something official, we could be looking at something a lot sort of further down here. But if it goes too far, then it has to be a Bills play.
For sure. And that's always a delicate balance that we try to tap dance throughout the weeks on this podcast. We've been tiptoeing and dancing around with the Dolphins all season long. Dolphins now find themselves, it's week 10, Dolphins, 3.5-point favorites at home to the Browns. The extra half point, as always, looms large, right? Dolphins offense, cooking. Tyreek, already well over 1,000 yards receiving, and we're through 9 weeks of the season. Insane. Browns coming off a bye week. I mentioned how important I feel like these bye weeks are. We should be getting a good version of the Browns, but what does that mean? I don't really know. So because of that, I am on the Miami Dolphins. I will take the extra half point. I'm laying 3.5 points with the Miami Dolphins. I talked about it early. I don't really like it. I'm laying a lot of points this week. It's not a nice place that I like where I'm at here, but here we are.
Apparently I made a bad bet here, and I'm not really sure why everybody loves the Browns all of a sudden.
Okay.
Again, market number. I have this thing. Let me just double check this because it's almost impossible to believe. Again, this is a team, prefacing this, right? Browns that were just 3.5-point home underdogs to the Bengals. Now you're going to the Dolphins. Like that has to be a pretty big flip here. And yet it just isn't, right? So let's do the comparison thing, right? Like on a neutral field, Bengals or Dolphins, like it's pretty close, like your point spread would probably be like -1, but I think you'd probably favor the Dolphins. But even if you favored,
especially without Jamar Chase, for sure.
Absolutely. Right. Which was the circumstance when the Browns played the Bengals. And so no home field advantage is being sort of, taken into account here, I guess, because the Browns won that game so convincingly. Like all of a sudden the Browns are good, like really good. So the point is like based on the market number of the last time we saw the Browns, i.e. now 2 weeks ago, Halloween night, this number is 6.5 for me. And it opened 4.5. And so I said to myself, why don't you just grab that number? Because my own personal ratings make Miami 6 in this game. And by the way, like I bet against Miami last week in Chicago, right? It's like one of the few big bets that I had that actually won last week.
Great cover for the Bears.
Yeah, so it's not like I'm anti-fading the Dolphins, but I also watched every bit of that game, and it's just like, man, that offense, like it's not just like that the players are so good. It's like they are wide open seemingly all the time. And like Waddle and Hill are two guys you do not want to have wide open. And I just don't buy that the Browns secondary pass defense is going to just hold up on the road against Miami. And yet this number has come down from 4.5. I'm seeing people being like, oh yeah, Browns, like grab the underdog Browns. I think they have a chance to win outright. And honestly, maybe they do. And maybe they do win this game. But like, I'm sitting here going like, how do I fudge the ratings to get the Browns to where they need to be here for this to make sense? Because like, honestly, I have to move the Browns into like the better than average category. Yeah. And like, not just like barely better than average, but like, I have to rate them like they are the Bengals. You know what I mean? Like a pretty good team. And like, I can't get there with the Browns. Like, I'm sorry, like that win was sweet, against the Bengals, but like, and again, we were on them on the money line as well. But like, I just can't get there. So again, maybe I'm missing something. Listen, I don't love the Dolphins defense by any stretch of the imagination, but like, newsflash here, Justin Fields is tearing up defenses on the ground, right? Patriots defense. How well did that work out for guys, the Sam Ellingers of the world, right? Like it isn't that easy. The Cowboys defense, right? Chicago lost that game handily because they couldn't stop the Cowboys, not because they were stopped by the Cowboys, outside of obviously that kind of like fluky fumble type play.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not going to blame the Dolphins too badly about like that, right? Like Jacoby Brissett's not housing a 70-yard touchdown run. I don't think.
Or pass.
Or pass for that matter. That's a great point. So yeah, I don't know what I'm missing here. I guess I'm just going to sit here with my -4.5, like an absolute dope. But like, I thought that was value. A lot of the times that kind of works out for me. Whatever. Okay. Yeah. Like, you know what? Best of luck, everybody, with your Browns tickets. Or I should say worst of luck.
I'm right there with you on the Miami Dolphins at -3.5. So fins up. Let's go. Switching gears here to the Lions at the Bears. Bears at home, 3-point favorites. We were just talking about the Bears, and Justin Fields seems to be everybody's favorite quarterback. Your favorite quarterback's favorite quarterback these days seems to be Justin Fields. Everyone on the bandwagon, so much so that they're laying 3 points. Not a place you would have thought you would have seen the Bears just a few weeks back. Again, I don't like this. I'm admitting this. I'm plugging my nose with this. The Lions, I just feel like that was a weird, chaotic game last week and might have been like their kind of like Super Bowl win. We finally beat the Packers and all that. And so normally I feel like I would take the Lions here in the points, but all of these things where all these teams are colliding, where they're moving past each other, I'm plugging my nose and I'm laying the 3 points with the Bears, man.
Yeah, I hopped on it at 2.5. I thought that was a fair number. Again, market base type number. So that being said, like, I think the Bears are on the way up, and the Lions, that win last week is going to sort of, I don't want to use the word trick, right? But like trick people into thinking that the Lions are like good. And like, for some reason, it does not take much for people to, call the Lions frisky. Right.
Yeah.
And the market moved this to 3. There's still some 2.5s with some like decent, respectable juice on there, right? Like a -115, I think, is last time I looked anyway. So like, you can still grab the Bears at that type of a number. I think it'll be very sort of enticing to grab the Lions +3, which means like, that's fine with me to take the Bears -3. Obviously the difference being that if it lands exactly on 3, you get a push. And so sometimes I go, okay, I don't really want that because I think it's really unlikely that my team wins by more than a field goal. I don't feel that this time around, right? I feel like the Bears can win this game by more than a field goal because, again, the defense is rough, but like, it's still a pretty engaged team. And, this is, it's a weird rivalry because they're always kind of at the bottom of the NFC North division, but like, this is still a serious game for a Bears team that like, I think a lot of people thought we're going to get checked out because they traded Roquan Smith, but like, they fought last week against the Dolphins. And like, it was a bummer that they like fell short because of wildly inconsistent pass interference rulings by the officials in that game. That was insanity, by the way. You know what I mean? But like, you know, second home game, you get Detroit coming out of the dome where they have been for the last couple of weeks, back outside, you know, potentially a little cold weather for Jared Goff, which he is no fan of. You know, I think the Bears are a really good bet here. I loved them a lot at -2.5, and, you know, I still think they can cover 3.
Ooh, I like it. I like it a lot. I like when we agree like that, and there's no, like, I don't need any extra convincing because I didn't really like it. I didn't really like being on the Bears. It's not a comfortable spot, but as I've learned over the years, sometimes it's not about the comfortable spots, right?
It's almost entirely about being uncomfortable.
I'm interested to hear how much you're going to be mad at me for this next pick here. The Jags at the Chiefs. And the Jags with the comeback win. They now head to Kansas City. Kansas City at home is 9.5-point favorites. 9.5 points is a lot. And I know that I should probably be taking the Jags here. And I know I say that with every Chiefs game when they're favored by too many points. But here's my thing with the Jags. The Jags fall behind against everybody. And it's the most annoying thing ever. And they have to pull off these comebacks and all that. And great. And you can do that against the Raiders. But you can't do that against the Chiefs. Now, does that mean they're going to come back and win? No. Does that mean that like you're going to come back against the Chiefs and you can't backdoor cover?
Yeah.
Sure. But I don't want to bet on Trevor Lawrence on a backdoor cover.
Right.
So I'm going to be on the Chiefs.
Okay.
Under 10. Under 10, I'm going to take that.
Were you on the Chiefs last week?
No.
Okay,
no.
good,
We were both
good.
on.
I'm pretty sure I talked. If I didn't talk you into it, or didn't need to talk you into it.
I stunned you last week, and we were on the Vrabel train. That Vrabel is going to be smart. I mean, he has no choice really, but he's just a smart enough coach to like manage the game, run the ball, keep the possessions low, sit back with all your DBs against Mahomes, all that fun stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to probably surprise you here. I'm with you on the Chiefs.
Oh, 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks in a row.
Well, 2 weeks in a row. No, like I was not on the Chiefs last week.
We're together.
No, yeah,
I see what
you're saying. Okay.
Normally, I'm just blindly on the Chiefs every week.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I was like, you didn't take the Titans last week, I don't think.
No.
Okay. So first and foremost, market number. Now, let me just sort of take you kind of through what happened last week, right? When we spoke, it was 12.5, something along those lines on the Wednesday. We were like, okay, you know, is Malik Willis, you know, going to play, or is it going to be Tannehill? What's the number if it's Tannehill? All that sort of thing, right? You know, they do the whole game time decision thing. They put Tannehill on the plane. They put him out on the field. He like saunters around for a bit, and he's like, no, I can't go. And the line goes up to 14. I hadn't bet it yet, so I'm like, okay, plus 14. Like, I guess we're going in on this. Like, let's do this. Because obviously we wanted to know what the quarterback situation was.
Yeah.
So as part of that, once that line is 14, right, you have to sort of play around with the numbers to go, okay, like how did we get to 14 on that game? That obviously went to overtime. And so, you know, you start with the Titans and you go, okay, like, well, we had Malik Willis the previous week against the Texans. So there was an adjustment going into that game, which is why they were only, you know, 2-3 point favorites against the awful Texans. So, okay, there's already been an adjustment. So we're going to adjust again, I guess, because there was an adjustment going into that game, but then we also saw that he basically, you know, can't throw the football, or they don't want him to throw the football. That was against the Texans. So, okay, we got to boot them. We got to boot the Titans down a little bit again.
Yeah.
And then I go, okay, like that still doesn't get me anywhere near 14 on the road. And so I go, well, the Chiefs are coming off a bye. All right, we got to do the Andy Reid bye thing. So we got to knock them up a couple of points on the old rating scale here from, you know, sort of mid 70s, you know, into sort of the mid to high 70s. And by the way, the last time we saw them, they were just running a train on San Francisco, as you well know. So I'm like, okay, let's bump the Kansas City Chiefs up a little bit. So I have to sort of preface it by saying, like, yes, I bumped the Chiefs up based on kind of those two things. One of those things being the bye week. Okay, we can knock that back down. And so from an actual numerical standpoint, like I have the Chiefs right now as a 75 out of 100. Okay. If anybody has an issue with that, they're welcome to contact me. The Jags, meanwhile, a little bit schizophrenic. Let's not get crazy here, but like I think we have a decent handle once we kind of got past the insanity of, remember, like the Jags were just kind of getting out of control and like maybe the Jags might be good. We sort of like reeled them back in a lot of ways and are now sort of in the high 30s when it comes to the Jags. So all that is to say the market number is about 12.5 on Kansas City. Okay. With all those things sort of being equal, if you will. And now again, I will sort of take the Chiefs down a little bit. I'll even take the Jags up for coming back and winning that game. And only then does it get to 9.5 points. Mm-hmm. Right. So the point is like, I never get below 9.5 in this game. So it's never about the Jags for me. So then it kind of becomes, okay, well, like you were sort of mentioning, like, okay, well, how do these two teams fit together? Like, do I trust the Jags to get out to some sort of lead and not have it be like Trevor Lawrence having to throw a ton? Well, like that worked, I guess, against the Raiders, but I also think the Raiders are horrifically coached and just honestly, in some cases, devoid of talent. So I just go, okay, like that's not really going to that's not going to work, as you mentioned. On the flip side, like, yeah, the Chiefs is like, things got a little hairy there against the Tennessee Titans. Oh, right? Yeah. So, like, this should be like a relatively focused type of spot here where they like actually get out to a lead and maybe kind of stomp whomever they're going to play. And if they were playing some like really good team that I was worried about, then maybe I would be a little bit sort of concerned. Now, the only concern I kind of have is next week they play the Chargers and what is like quite literally or almost literally a clinching game for them in the AFC West, right? If you can get both games against the Chargers, all of that sort of thing. But I just don't think it's going to be that sort of letdown type spot because of what happened last week, right? They, you know, you kind of come out of the bye, you're like, oh yeah, we're going to take down this team that doesn't have to throw the football or can't throw the football or whatever. But like, we know what the Vrabel deal is. Like, he's going to be, you know, they're in the corners, right? They're in the dark areas. So I think this is more of a tune-up for the Chargers as far as like, okay, like we got one real big game here next week. And maybe there's even an element of like, oh man, if Josh Allen's out for Buffalo, like we might take a run at the number 1 seed, having just vanquished, as again, weird as it is to sound, the Titans, who if they had won that game would have been like 6-3 and back into the hunt all of a sudden for their second straight, you know, number 1 seed. But when it comes to Kansas City and Buffalo, really matters who's going to get that 1 seed.
Definitely.
Right? And yeah, the Bills already have the head start, having beaten Kansas City. But if things get a little crazy here for Josh Allen, he's not around for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Like, you can sort of smell the blood here if you're the Chiefs. And they got away with one last week. And I just don't think they sort of lollygag, if you will, through this game. And I think this is actually a pretty decent bet. I grabbed -9 at -108. That was available at one site. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. 9.5 is good. Yeah, this is a Chiefs blowout spot, which, you know, again, we don't say a ton of, but it's not because this line is inflated in any sort of a way.
Yeah, I just think the not overreacting to what happened last week against a very coached team, well-coached team that knows what they're doing, knows how to use what he has. That makes sense. How to get the most out of what he has. Makes a lot of sense to not overreact coming back in this week. Let's keep things moving, though, with the Broncos at the Titans, the aforementioned Titans. Broncos coming off a bye. I like them even less coming off a bye. No, I'm joking. But even with that said, laying 3 points seems like a lot with the Tennessee Titans. And I would hope that we're getting the best of what the Broncos could possibly be at coming off their bye week. And the Titans team on a short week and a brutal, like, you know, overtime game on Monday night, that's a tough spot to be then laying 3 points against a team coming off a bye. So for that reason, I'm on the Broncos in this one. This is just spots for me.
Yeah, and for me, this is like, you know, a change in requirement, right? Where we go, the Titans all we asked of the Titans was not to get absolutely annihilated last week. And now you're asking the Titans, like when push comes to shove, to win a game by margin. And you'll remember, like, they did that in kind of a similar spot against the Colts. But then the Colts decided, hey, we're in such a disarray that Jeff Saturday and Sam Ehlinger is going to be our answers going forward. It's like maybe the Colts weren't necessarily like the best franchise to kind of, you know, sort of, you know, copy, if you will. So I'm not going to compare the Broncos to the Colts. I think the Broncos are better than that. Now, again, I'm a little bit concerned with some of the injuries that the Broncos have suffered defensively. Obviously not the best effort necessarily against the Jags, but they end up winning that game. And so at least they go into the bye going like, well, you're telling me there's a chance. And you look around at the rest of the league, specifically this AFC South, and you're like, okay, all those three teams are basically out of the running. And then you look at, obviously there's some decent, I guess, teams in the Jets. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. But there's a lot going on in the AFC East. But we're talking about now having multiple wild cards here that you can potentially get. And you still have a home game against the Chargers left. And so you're going, okay, you can kind of talk yourself into well, maybe we got a shot here at getting into the playoffs. Now, I'm not sure what Nathaniel Hackett would be doing on his bye week other than playing tiddlywinks over and over and over again. Go ahead and Google that game, which is, I think, a game that Hackett would absolutely be into. That being said, we're requiring Tennessee to cover a game. And by the way, we're not asking the Broncos to really do anything that's sort of out of the realm of their sort of capabilities here, right? We're still rating them very, very lowly. Now, the problem is with the Titans, we have no real clue, or we've been battling their rating, right? I just talked about, to get to 14-point underdogs on the road, we had to get them all the way down to kind of 33, right? Which, again, by the way, is where we would have the Packers if the Packers were 5-point home underdogs against the Cowboys in real life, which apparently is the thing. So the point is, when we see these teams kind of get booted down to the low 30s, AKA Texan territory, obviously that isn't the case. So, okay, well, are we going to move them all the way back up to where they were? Now, when I say all the way back up, it was still kind of a worse than average team, as weird as that is to say about a team that's quite the favorite to win their division. But look at the metrics, right? You have to at least acknowledge that they are in the bottom third of defensive metrics and the bottom third of offensive metrics, and just go okay, that exists. Yes, Derrick Henry has sort of found his game here middle of the season, but this, we can't rate this team any higher than kind of even. So even if we bumped up the Titans to kind of back to where they were under Ryan Tannehill, I haven't seen anything that indicates that Tannehill definitely isn't back. At the best case scenario, we're getting to 2.5 here on the Titans, right? And if it was 2.5, I could have the conversation about the Titans winning a close game by a field goal, yada yada yada. But I'm more likely to think that the Broncos and the Titans here have just a miserable football game where there's almost no scoring. There's a ton of field goals. Once we start getting into a ton of field goals, that's when we start getting into 1 and 2 being viable winning margins, right? Where we get into the 14-13s, the 19-17s, the 17-16s, every point matters type of games. These two teams are every point matters type of teams, which, by the way, is going to lend itself to an epic teaser leg here. +9, Yeah. Again, I say +9 because I don't think you're getting a flat 3 just yet here with the Broncos. I think, you're paying juice right now, 115 to 120. So 9 is sort of a viable way just to grab that teaser leg now, because there is another really good teaser leg that we're going to talk about here shortly. Denver teaser leg, Denver +3, you know what I mean? Go for it, Titans. Do your worst and see if you can kind of pull away from the Broncos, where I think even if, down 10 or something along those lines, right? The Broncos are still going to be in this game, slinging it around, maybe futilely, but, again, it's still Russell Wilson we're talking about here. And so I think you're getting the better quarterback and maybe the better team, as weird as it is to say, especially if Malik Willis is in, on the Broncos. And I'll take those 3 points.
Ooh, okay. Interested to see what you'll do with these 3 points. We got the Cardinals at the Rams. Rams at home, favored by 3. How the mighty NFC West has fallen. I mean, these two teams, things not going too well this season. I don't know how the Rams are favored by 3 against anyone at this point, but then I see Kyler beefing with basically his whole team and wonder, things are kind of tough. But I think I have this correctly. I'm on the Rams -3 because I think I have the merry-go-round of McVay versus Kingsbury going correctly. Do I have that right?
You do, yeah. The cycle of the NFC West. I mean, honestly, though, the just fundamental issue here. Well, I'll put it this way: you're talking about the 3-point line and should the Rams be favored by 3 over anybody? I would say, should the Rams be favored by 4 against anybody? And the answer was no, because this opened 4.
Ooh.
And I gleefully, even after watching the Arizona Cardinals and steam just piling out of my ears watching the Arizona Cardinals, even then I was still like, nope, got to take the Cardinals plus
Can't
4. Yeah, this cannot be, -4 for the Rams. And apparently I wasn't the only one, because this thing is now down to a flat 3. You're right about the NFC West cycle of doom. That this is that, if you will. I just look at this and I go, okay, we never, we're not supposed to like the Cardinals at home. We're supposed to like them a lot better on the road. They're obviously, I think very live to beat the Vikings a couple of weeks ago. It just didn't work out. Part of that was a muff punt type situation. The matchup here to me is Byron Murphy against Cooper Kupp. Go back and look at his stats. When Cooper Kupp plays against the Cardinals, they shut him down pretty well. Mm-hmm. And again, that's one thing when Odell Beckham's running around, and they have something of a running game and all of that sort of thing. But it's just still not there, right? Van Jefferson complains about not getting balls thrown to him. They throw to him one deep and it hits him right in the chest in the first quarter or second quarter of the game last week. And it's that's what the Rams are doing. They're complaining about stuff and then still not playing well, right? Cam Akers came in, after complaining and almost, they couldn't give that guy away, right? So I just go yeah, I think the Cardinals can win this game, even though I don't have any respect for the way that the Cardinals play football, right? We talk about Robbie Anderson just taking, the needless penalties of he's jumping off or false starting because he doesn't get himself lined up correctly. And it takes him too long to realize that. And he's just so out of the game. And it's that cost them, I believe that cost them a touchdown, if not a key first down, right? Kyler Murray converts a 4th down and he's running free, but he doesn't have the ball tucked away. And so they fumble, right? It's the plays are there for the Cardinals. They just don't execute them. There's always something wrong. And so, yes, that's a fundamental issue and why Cliff Kingsbury is going to get fired after this season, because they're not going to clean that up, but at least the plays are there. If it isn't Cooper Kupp involved, the plays aren't there for the Rams. Where do these plays come from, right? Outside of screens to Higbee early in the San Francisco game, where they had those plays sort of in the script, and we're okay, we're going to get him with these screen plays. And then the 49ers okay, now we know you're running tight end screens as your best offense. I think we can figure that out. That became a blowout in the second half. Now, I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury is sharp enough to kind of figure anything like that out, which is why I like +4 a lot more than I like +3. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals won this game, despite the, sort of the storyline, if you will, of the cycle of doom. I can't bet on this Rams team. And they just kind of keep getting away with pushes, and you know what I mean, on their point spreads, and you know what I mean, covering that number against the Panthers still really makes me angry from a few weeks ago. And it's they're not doing anything completely embarrassing, because a lot of teams have gotten caught up by Tom Brady in the with a minute to go, but there's something more wrong about this Rams team than we're willing to admit. It just isn't as obvious as when you're watching Cliff Kingsbury blank stare out into the field because he doesn't know what to do next. And that probably infuriates Kyler Murray. And I don't even really like Kyler Murray all that much.
Yeah, no, totally get you. Totally going to be interested to see where this game lands. I'm just more comfortable with, as you mentioned, the push here. And if I'm okay to be all right with that result, if the Rams can only hold on and win by 3. This next game, my Houston Texans, pardon me, who the running joke is I love betting on the Texans when they are huge underdogs and they just have a way of covering big spreads. That held true again for us last week. This week, I know it's 5 points. Seems like a lot to be underdogs to the New York Giants. But this is another one of those games that I was talking about earlier. You've heard me mention a few times, teams coming off of the bye. I'm going to trust the Giants here, feeling as if, Daniel Jones, he's getting banged up a little bit here in the last little bit, maybe a week off, has him a little fresher, has Dable just pounding him into the line even more coming off their bye. All of the above. Either way, Giants -5. I don't like it. Plugging my nose, taking the Giants here. Yeah, maybe my Texans will be mad at me for turning against them here, but I'm on the Giants.
I think they should be. What about the Giants has given you any indication that they not win because they've won a bunch of games, but should be relied upon to cover a number
You're
of
totally
significance? Right. And this, and don't get me wrong, this number appeared and for a pretty extensive time at 7.
Woo!
A full 7.
You would have had me talking there on the Texans there at 7. I'd be right in there, right? I just missed it. Missed it.
And so that's why sort of being prepared, being ready and sort of having, kind of an understanding of the ratings in the market and that sort of thing. And just going oh, nope, Giants can never be 7. Literally, if it's not the Texans at home, it's we always go oh, they can't be this against anybody. This is quite literally anybody. Right? The Texans are the worst rated team. Yeah. So we are officially at Giants can't be 7 or 6.5, which they were, or 6, which they also were on the way down to 5. That's the case, right? They literally cannot be there against the Texans. Now, from a football standpoint, right? If I told you there was a football team who ran the football really, really well, but did not defend the run at all, right? Which one of these teams would that be? And I'm here to stop you because the answer is both. Both.
I was with you. Don't worry. I was with you.
Both of these teams are that. And so, but the point is and then you get into okay, do we trust the quarterback in the passing game, right? Daniel Jones certainly, obviously runs the football a little bit better and maybe he's the difference and maybe he's why the Giants win the game. I think the Texans are very live though, because outside of Jones's ability to run, we've got Davis Mills going up against a really thin secondary that got even thinner because of an ATV injury over the bye week, right? Yep. Speaking of bye weeks being a potential negative at some point.
And everyone mad at Odell still, eh?
Everybody's or are they? I don't know. I mean, wasn't he on the list of teams? I don't know. All right. Or weren't they on his list of teams? Or there was some sort of list and it included the Giants. But okay, so I think Davis Mills is going to have opportunity to throw the ball here nicely, and I think Daniel Jones could as well. But honestly, I kind of like the Texans secondary with Stingley and Petrie and those. I think they've hit on a couple of really good rookies in the secondary. And so I kind of like the Houston Texans secondary a little bit better, though I like the Giants pass rush a little bit better. All that is to say, these teams are honestly kind of the same, except for A, branding and the excitement of New York, and B, actual victories kind of getting pulled out of their this season. And so that's why the number has come off of 7 and come off of 6, because people are honestly, these teams aren't that different. So we're going to give the Giants a few points because they are the better team. Don't get me wrong. But my number and my ratings come to 5, right? So great bet at +7, good bet at +6.5, certainly a bet at +6. But at 5, now we kind of go, okay, we have to get deeper into the football stuff. But since the football stuff kind of makes sense to me as far as these teams kind of matching up, running the ball at each other, and probably having pretty good success, we might be looking at kind of long drives, low scoring, as both these teams are kind of used to, doing. And honestly, you're going to give me +250, or at least it used to be +250 when this was 6.5 on the money line. I think the Texans have a real chance to win this game. There isn't that huge disparity when it comes to rest, because the Giants obviously had their bye week, but the Texans have had a mini bye week as well. And, listen, Daboll, way better coach than Lovie Smith. He'll have some plays for Lovie Smith's stubborn cover 2 zone defense. They will get their points, right? But I think the Texans can as well. I think this game's going to be pretty competitive, but at +5, right, we're kind of getting into where it should be or should have been the whole time.
Yeah.
It wasn't at first, and so we hopped on it.
Damn Vegas zone will always get you, always have me wondering what I should and shouldn't be doing. Much like our next game here, we have the Saints at the Steelers. Saints on the road, 2.5-point favorites. This is an ugly one. I mentioned again, bye weeks. And I don't like this pick. As I'm even looking at my own pick, picking the Steelers as home underdogs here, I don't really like it. But the Saints are coming off the short week. The Steelers are coming off a bye week. And I've used this line before. should this be the best version of the Steelers? But what does that actually mean? Right.
Right.
But I feel like the Saints in a physical, tough Monday nighter against the Ravens, that's not an easy outing on a short week. I'm on the home dogs for that reason, but I'm not going to lie to you. I can be easily talked out of this Steelers plus 2.5 pick.
Well, I'm going to talk you out of it, but not in the way that you think. If you're interested, or if you like Pittsburgh plus 2.5, Pittsburgh plus 8.5, is that something you might be interested in? Because this is the other teaser leg, right? Like, throw these 4 teams, right? Denver, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and New Orleans. They're all coming from different divisions, but they're all coming to play a low-scoring, tight game where you just dare one of these teams to beat you by 2 scores, right? Yeah. And if you get plus 9 in any permutation of these 4 teams, or plus 8.5 in any permutation of those 4 teams, and honestly, we could probably find 4 more teams to throw into the pot with these teams. Yeah, absolutely do it. So, I mean, market number honestly is pick 'em for me based on the previous point spreads, and that includes, or I should say, if we include the Saints rating going up, which I think they are sort of better than the market thinks. That was not necessarily proven the case on Monday Night Football. So a little bit of egg on your boy's face in that situation. But
I was with you.
But my number of upgrading the Saints mirrors why the Saints would be minus 2.5, right? So my point spread is minus 2.5. Because I'm a little bit higher on the Saints and honestly a little bit lower than the market on the Steelers. But based on point spreads, this should be closer to pick 'em. I think this game's a literal toss up. I mean, I could tell you Steelers money line because you're getting a coin flip for, plus 115 or whatever it is right now. Okay, cool, but that would mean you're asking the Steelers to win a football game, which I don't really have a ton of interest in doing.
Yeah.
But what I have a ton of interest in doing is bumping this thing up to 8.5, pairing it with the Broncos, and just rolling there with that teaser. Spoiler alert, that's going to be my teaser of the week.
Woo! All right. We're rounding down the final stretch here of this pod. We also got a super interesting game talking about asking teams to win. I mean, here's 2 desperate teams looking for a win. We got the Colts at the Raiders. Raiders are favored by 6. And I'm looking at this and thinking, hold on, how are the Raiders favored by 6? And in comes your man's Jeff Saturday, right? 0 coaching experience, ready to take over. Yeah. Do we know who's calling the plays yet for the Colts? I have no idea. Is Matt Ryan coming back, or are we still in Ellinger land? I have no idea. And then I saw Jim Irsay's presser, and I was like, oh, I don't think he has any idea what is going on either. No. I'm leaning on the Raiders here, but it can only be a lean because I can't possibly come out here confidently being I love the Raiders at minus 6, sure. Right? I can't do that.
You mentioned
I'm on the Raiders.
You mentioned these 2 teams are desperate teams. These 2 teams might as well be getting out of a cab in New York City looking for an acting career and hoping somebody gives them a chance to show how pretty they are, because these 2 teams are that desperate, and that's where we're at, right? Where I don't know, I am worried for these 2 teams and where they are headed, right? I don't want to see the rest of the movie or the TV show because it's only going to kind of bum me out. But of course they're playing each other, right? Because we talked about kind of getting into lulls with the season, and it's I feel we just keep hitting these games and these matchups of 2 teams we'd really like to bet on, and here comes 2 teams that we'd really like to fade, and oh good, we're now just measuring up which situation is worse. Which team is more pathetic at this point? And I don't really know what the answer is, especially when you start adding, point spreads into the mix, because this line should have been, again, market number 4.5. Okay. So we saw the boost to 6. There was even some 6.5s popped up literally the moment that Jeff Saturday was hired. It was nope, we're going up. We rather nobody be the coach. Okay, we were into no one head coaching this team more than we were into Jeff Saturday coaching this team.
That's amazing.
And then honestly, everybody looked at this and was man, Josh McDaniels at a touchdown needs to win by a full converted touchdown. The best part about the Raiders is that you can probably rely on that conversion because the kicker is the best player on the team, or at least the most reliable player on the team. Mm-hmm. And so, like, yeah, I hopped on. I actually bet -6, and like, even as I say it, I was like, oh god, now maybe I'm getting out of the cab in New York City. But like, that's really kind of sad in and of itself. But it's like Jeff Saturday and Sam Ehlinger is the combination. You asked who's calling plays offensively. Some guy named Parks. Parks is his first name.
Cherokee Parks?
No, it's his. I mean, I think it's like Parks Terwilliger or something. I don't know. He's like 30 years old. Okay. He's like an assistant to the assistant. He's basically the assistant to the traveling secretary. It's George Costanza calling plays out here. And like, the plays weren't all that good to begin with last week when they got annihilated by the Patriots. And so, well, okay, we're just going to trust the Raiders to annihilate them too. It's like, the answer to that is like, I guess, because I'm way more into doing that than like talking myself into like, oh, high variance, high volatility Colts. Like, I don't think that's what this is. I think this is just like the Colts are like really bad. And you could do the like, you know, we're not that far off from bowl season in college football where you go, oh man, they lost their coach and like a bunch of guys went with them. And then like this assistant special teams coach like takes over and like the kids rally around this guy, right? And all of a sudden they win the bowl game, you know, the quasi meaningless bowl game, and he's getting doused by Gatorade, and you're wondering how your -10.5 bet not only didn't cover, but that team didn't even win outright. That's not the NFL. Like, Jeff Saturday doesn't get to walk in, do some sort of speech, and like all of a sudden these professionals and the coaching staff around him that are like, why don't I get a chance to do this? Right. Even in an interim basis, why does this guy get this chance who was just on ESPN, you know, talking to Mina Kimes and Dan Orlovsky? Like, what motivation are we supposed to have for this team? So like, yeah, it's a tough scene for the Raiders, but at least they're capable of 17 points consecutively last week on the road. Like, okay, fine. Take my money. Like, again, I'll probably watch this game and it'll be 28-7 Raiders, and I'll be wondering how I didn't bet like the world on the Raiders because of this ridiculous situation. But like, that's how bad it is for the Raiders at this point. So it literally is Raiders or nothing, with honestly nothing is probably the better.
No, I'm right there with you on the Raiders as well. We're into the final stretch. Sunday night football. Chargers at the San Francisco 49ers. Niners coming off the bye, but 7 seems like a lot of points. The Chargers, though, are a gong show. The only reason I'm on the Niners, and if you follow this pod, you know I'm a Niners fan, but I rarely ever lay points with the Niners in any circumstance, really. But you're telling me a full week to install Christian McCaffrey package, Deebo Samuel practicing again, could be back in the lineup. I can't lie, that has me kind of exciting. Not even Jimmy Garoppolo should be able to screw this one up. I really need you to talk me out of taking the Niners -7 in this. I'm on the Niners, but I feel like I need you to talk me out of it because I'm kind of giddy.
I am absolutely going to do that because laying 7 with the Niners here is patently ridiculous, right? Like, they've had time to install a package. Like, okay, sure, but like, Shanahan's had time to install all kinds of stuff with Jimmy Garoppolo and obviously Deebo Samuel and like all of the weapons that he's had before that. And like, it's so cool that like McCaffrey comes in, he's throwing touchdown passes, and he looks like peak Christian McCaffrey. But like, we can't live our lives saying running backs don't really matter all that much, like to the point spread and from a valuation standpoint, and never draft them in the first round anymore and never give them big second contracts and all of that sort of thing. And I realize that McCaffrey at his finest is an absolute unicorn. But like, only one guy gets to hang on to the ball at one time on one play, so to speak. There's only so much that they can do. And the rating boost that the 49ers have gotten that has led to this being them at -7. Like, we're not psyched about the Chargers. We have them at a robust like 54. Right? Like, just barely better than average, disappointing because they could have been in the 70s if anybody on that team had stayed healthy, but like still getting things done and like beating crappy teams. And in this case, hanging around. Oh, there's a new thing going on here. He's got a ball instead of the mouse. We've got him switching, everybody. But like, we know what the Chargers are. And like, I don't want anything to do with the Chargers when it's -7 for them. right? Against anyone, Texans, Jaguars, whatever you got. But +7, now we're having a conversation, right? Like,
now we're getting spicy.
Yeah, like I'll put it this way. Like, I've upgraded the 49ers significantly under the excitement of all of the weapons and all of this stuff. But then I have to look and be like, yeah, this is still a 4-4 team whose like biggest claim to fame here, whose biggest ratings bump is because of 2 wins over the Rams. A team that, 1, we don't really like this year in the first place, and 2, we know has sort of a built-in systematic advantage over, right? The 49ers Correct. Do. So it's like, okay, you already beat the team that you always beat. You did it twice, and you have literally 2 other victories along the way. Now, the scary part is they're getting healthier and all of that stuff, but like they've disappointed before under these circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I have no interest in, again, Jimmy G can get a little loose with the football. You know, he can. Right. So like, I'm going to need like a real professional, solid effort out of a team. And I don't know that I can't guarantee that I'm going to get that from the 49ers to cover more than a touchdown here. So grab the Chargers +7. I think this number comes down from 7. I will be shocked if we just go from now until Sunday night with this number just sitting on 7. This has to be 6, 6.5. Like I said, I have a massive upgrade for the 49ers, and only that gets me to 5.5 for the 49ers. The market number for this game is 3.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Announcing that the pick has been switched from the 49ers to the Chargers. Let's keep things rolling. We got 1 game left on the docket, and it's Monday Night Football. We have the Commanders at the Eagles. Eagles 11-point favorites, and we're back here again. Double-digit spreads. I am on Washington. Can you talk me out of taking the Commanders?
Well, when you left me there, I thought I was going to have to do my own monologue on Monday Night Football, which, listen, I'm capable of doing, but I don't have a ton necessarily to say about this game.
Totally
about 5 minutes straight of me talking. When you look at this number, you go, oh man, 11, like that seems really high. Washington, like they actually win football games, or they're in football games, et cetera, et cetera. Honestly, from a market standpoint, this number should be 11.5 to 11.
Ooh, okay.
So there isn't any sort of like, oh man, you're getting a ton of points here. There should be 9. There's no real reason why that number isn't appropriate, right? As much as kind of a tough spot last week. We knew that the Eagles were getting overvalued by being 14-point road favorites, but this is different, right? They are 11. They are at home. And the case against Washington, you want me to make one for you?
No.
Taylor Heineke's rabid desire to turn the ball over, even if teams refuse to take it, right? Like there's a Curtis Samuel touchdown last week where it was just like, I don't understand how that happened. And like, there weren't a ton of other points out there for the Commanders. The Vikings couldn't really take advantage of Taylor Heineke being loose with the football. A team who feels like they're going to take advantage at home of a bunch of Taylor Heineke kind of foolishness. A couple of cornerbacks who are pretty good at jumping routes and that sort of thing.
They'll be waiting for it.
A defensive line rotation that is going to gobble him up. Remember, they played this game already, right?
Yep.
And the Eagles scored at will. So as much as I usually kind of like the Commanders and the defensive line, and I can make the case for them as underdogs, especially at home with a short number, et cetera, I don't really have that for you, man. I think the Eagles score a lot, and I think they might have some short fields involved when it comes to Taylor Heineke. So, like, no, not for me. This is a fairly priced game.
I love it. The pick has been switched again, people. We are back in business. We are on the Philadelphia Eagles -11. But where can the people find you? Because there's a lot of movement that will happen between now and kickoff. Where can the people find you to get all the information, my dude?
Absolutely. At @MRussAuthentic is the Twitter handle. And of course, the Score app. You already have it in your phone. You're already checking scores. Get your betting notifications in our betting section. Get those alerts fired up so that you know as soon as we've got all of our different articles. Just wrote the Thursday Night Football Seinfeld-themed props article. The Round Robin Moneyline Parlay is already out on the streets. And there's even a special, we're going to talk for 5 seconds here about college football, a Heisman Trophy bet, and the first national championship bet I've made since the summer where I got the Rogue Ohio State number. We're sitting on like 6-1 there. But the first real in-season national championship bet just published this morning, widely available. No, it is not Georgia. No, it is not Ohio State. It is another team here that is getting disrespected based on one game. That might have happened last weekend.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And you can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the On Blast Podcast, NFL Picks Edition, part of the On Blast Podcast Network. And as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.